The foundation for the stability of the world for a long time has been the United States. We are seeing that transition, just like you said, right? It's that place where you slide the pizza off the pizza pan and onto the cutting board, right? We've been the pizza pan for a long time, and now it's sliding to someone else. The pizza's still very stable, but what's the platform? What's the foundation? I am always optimistic that the United States will recover. It will change its ways, will find a way to reunify the incredible polarity that we're in right now and get focused on the one true goal, American primacy.
Do you think that's possible in a world where I know, just saying American primacy, it like puts you at risk of being canceled? Like people just, there is a contingent. I won't even say how big it is, but they're fucking loud. There is a contingent of people, and it could be large, that's offensive.
I understand it. I do. I understand it, and that's okay. I hope that doesn't happen on your show, right?
You'll get some of it, to be sure.
No, I'm not worried about it happening to me. I just hope nobody cancels your show.
But too rich for that.
But the truth is, American survival is not being threatened. We don't have an existential threat to the United States. Existential threats are the threats that make people move. We talk about existential threats. More likely, other countries talk about existential threats. And what is an existential threat? A true existential threat is a threat that challenges your very existence. The existence of the United States is contingent upon the existence of the United States government, not Americans. Like we sometimes think that Americans make the United States. The United States is a representative republic government that has never existed before that now exists. So if that government falls or if that government cracks or breaks, all the people will still be here, right? But America will be gone. So the existential threat to the United States is the one that would trigger Americans to react. Now we've come close to those moments. 9/11 is one of those times. When all Americans...
That felt awesome for a hot minute. It felt so good. The unity, yeah.
Yeah, all of a sudden, all of our differences melted away, right? The same thing happened at Pearl Harbor. All of our differences melted away because we had a common enemy. And we could individually see the existential threat posed to our country and our livelihood. Since 9/11, we have not had that kind of a threat. Countries around us have woken up to the fact, just like Emperor Hirohito in World War II said, "I fear we have woke a sleeping dragon." Our enemies have learned that Americans are slow to react. But when they react in full force. There's no way a savvy, intelligent, superpower competitor, GPC, global power competitor, is going to trigger an existential threat to the United States. Because they know that as long as they basically let us segment ourselves separately, as long as we insulate ourselves separately, we're going to eat ourselves to death with our own stupid little bitter squabbles about American primacy, right? Or about woke culture, or about representation, or about who knows what. We're going to just waste our time bickering in our little room, and we're not going to wake up to what's happening in the entire building. That's the strategy of the future.
Is to keep us divided.
It's not to keep, an influence campaign is always cheaper, easier, and and has a higher probability of success than a military campaign. So an influence campaign is basically like, hey, don't forget that you have race issues. Hey, don't forget that there's a socioeconomic divide. Hey, don't forget that the South tried to secede from the Union one. They're just picking, they're just poking and throwing salt on a wound. And then we are fighting over it. Right? And we fill our days worrying about this garbage, blind to what's happening on the larger scale, blind to the fact that the fantastic example is the global war on terrorism. The United States led the global war on terrorism following 9/11, right? And it felt good for a hot minute, like you said. We were all on the same page and we were all in this fight. Then that fight lasted 10 years. And then that fight lasted 20 years.
Also, it became so dodgy. Like what we were like, if we had just been relentless about Osama bin Laden,
That's
like
one
when I
thing.
heard how we caught him in like the size of a shadow, I don't know if that's true, but like it sounded dope. And I was just like, dude, we're ninjas. This is amazing.
Yeah.
But that was after like a lot of, and look, I'm not super engaged in this stuff, so I'm definitely popping off ignorantly, but it did not feel good as a casual observer where we ended up going and how we ended up fighting and all that. And it just seemed like, wait, what are we doing?
Right.
So that felt like a squandered opportunity.
Well, during those 20 years, while we were mastering the art of hunting terrorism, hunting terrorists in mountains in Pakistan and Afghanistan, what were our global power competitors doing? Was Russia engaged in the global war on terror? Was China involved in the global war on terror? So all the hundreds of billions of dollars that we spent in that war, we spent in a war that was a giant distraction for us that gave our closest near-peer competitors 20 years to invest their money and grow to become a larger threat than we were even aware they were becoming, right? And then China, all of a sudden, China has multiple aircraft carriers and they're launching aircraft from aircraft carriers and they can project power into the South Asian seas. That's insane, right? All of a sudden, like the Russian Federation is in close relationships with the Chinese and the Syrians and the North Koreans and the Iranians. How do we just wake up to this? Right? And that's what happens. It happens because we are still an adolescent country. So we get very myopic and we become very focused on the thing that we're playing with right now. And we lose the larger sight, the larger vision. The world has watched us do this for too long, and they don't make the same mistake twice, especially not authoritarian countries, because authoritarian countries have the benefit of authoritarian rulers that sit in an office or sit in a place, in a chair, for 15, 20, 30 years, right? They don't deal with the kind of tumult and transition that we have in the United States. I believe our constant change of leadership is part of what makes us strong, but we haven't yet learned how to have a change in leadership without a change in focus. That's what we haven't quite learned to do yet. So we're giving our authoritarian enemies an opportunity to have focus for a long period of time against us, while we don't have that against them.
Okay, so why were we able to be so strong? And now we're not. Before you even answer that question, let me frame it for people. And if I go wrong on any of this, let me know. But this to me goes back to what I did not expect to be the theme of this conversation, but how hilariously predictable humans are. So Ray Dalio takes a very economic view of the world, and he's like, oh, hey, by the way, what he calls the big cycle is so predictable that he broke it down into 6 phases. And every empire has gone through these 6 phases. They last for roughly like 100 to 150 years. America's basically at the end of the 100-year cycle. And phase 6 is total collapse, war, basically. And the old world order falls apart. There's usually a violent war, and then a new world order is established. And we're like clockwork on the cycle from a money perspective, from a division perspective, like everything just lines up. So you have to have an internal populace that is divided. You need to get yourself over your skis from a debt perspective, which we've done. You have to start printing money like crazy, and there has to be a new superpower on the rise. Like it's the stage is set, and the stage was set in World War II, which is how we became the dominant power. To your point about waking a sleeping dragon woke up, but now we're in trouble. So that's my overly simplistic view of why this worked. It was sort of a fluke, not a fluke, but it was we hit the cycle at just the right moment when the British Empire collapsed at the end of World War II. Because of our geography, we weren't destroyed by bombs. So we come out of the war pretty much unscathed. So we ramp up all of our production capabilities. We absolutely crush it. We help win. We create the nuclear bomb. Just a lot of things come together. And so then we're established as the world reserve currency. Because it's not like we weren't divided before then, but we got to really enjoy a hot minute of prosperity. Does that seem like the right breakdown of why we could overcome our differences previously and now we can't? Like, how do you...
Yeah, I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's wrong at all. I think that it's interesting to me because it sounds like Ray Dalio, one of the reasons you respect him so much is because his analysis is based in economics.
And he's put his money where his mouth is.
Economics and economists have long been viewed as the true predictors of future prosperity. At CIA, we lean heavily into economic studies. Economic experts, economic analysis, the law of economics, because the law of economics is that of the law of scarcity. One of the first and most underrated economists out there was actually a Soviet economist, a guy named Kondratiev. Kondratiev created what's known as the Kondratiev wave, the Kondratiev cycle. That cycle essentially puts us, it explains the pattern of interstate conflict or intrastate conflict, where countries compete, actually go to war with each other. And it puts it on about a 25-year cycle. 25 years to a peak in conflict, 25 years to a drop in conflict. And then as the wave continues, like most waves, the actual peak of the waves expands. So it goes from being 25 years to then 32 years to 32 years. And you start to see this longer, slower wave, right? But it's still a wave, form. The next peak of conflict, according to Kondratiev's wave, against the United States' point of view, happens in about 2024, 2025.
Oh, great.
So we now have multiple economists basically saying that there's a peak coming, a peak of conflict coming. And that conflict for the Kondratiev wave is a peak of popular conflict and unpopular conflict. So we're coming off of an unpopular conflict, right? Afghanistan and Iraq largely turned into an unpopular conflict at the end, right? And the wave between when that started and when the next wave is coming is right in that 25-year mark, right? So according to Kondratiev, we are not only coming up on a period of conflict, but it will be popular inside the United States. So people will rally behind that conflict. That doesn't mean we're going to win. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be in our best interest, but it does mean, to your point earlier, that we might see that moment where everybody kind of comes together again. I think part of the reason that we were able to be successful was because of the same rules of economics that you laid out from World War II. Our country, hugely unpopular. Western expansion was hugely unpopular at the time. The Civil War, nobody wants to see the Civil War again. Most people would say the Civil War was a traumatic and horrible, loss of life. At the time, there was no other option. Abraham Lincoln had no option except to pursue civil war because he knew that the presidents before him had been working to create a single solitary nation that had national security from coast to coast. We can say it was a fight for states' rights. We can say it was a fight for slavery. We can say it was a fight for lots of things. And those are also true, but they may not be the number one reason why the Civil War was so important. The Civil War was so important because we needed to remain one unified country from coast to coast to have American primacy in the long run. American primacy is a concept that was created by Alexander Hamilton.
Really?
American primacy is not new. There's an entire society out there called the Alexander Hamilton Society that's focused on preserving the ideals of Alexander Hamilton and the founding fathers, who all believed that a strong United States meant a strong world because they saw and lived through the oppression of living under a monarchy, right? If you look at the top 5 wealthiest countries in the world right now, the top 5 wealthiest countries in the world, 2 of them are democracies. The other 3 are monarchies, right? So the idea that democracy is the solution to all wealth and success hasn't really been proven yet. We're still outnumbered by monarchies, right? So what does the future hold? The future will be conflict is coming. Multiple economists have pointed to it. You can see the writing on the wall, what my wife and I call the writing on the wall. Conflict is coming. What will that conflict look like is the bigger question. You talked earlier about how, you and I might be of the same ilk when it comes to, are we already engaged in World War III? Is World War III coming up? What will that World War look like? There is conflict coming. There is no reason for us to think it will look like it looked in World War II. If anything, conflict has proven to us that it evolves and changes just like technology and just like human thinking, right? but it's still predictable because it takes human beings to wage war.
So fresh, so new.